Hair cosmetics sold for roughly $630 million. From pimple patches, tiny stickers people put on the pimples before going to bed. And if you're trying to figure out what products are actually worth testing, that's a pretty crazy thing to think about. Because nobody looks at pimple patches and thinks, yep, that's probably a 9-figure category. So how early could someone have seen this coming? What clues were visible before the acquisition, before the media coverage, and before every retail decided they need their own version? That's what I wanted to find out. In this video, we're going to go back to the point where pimple patches still look like just another boring skincare product and break down the clues that showed up before the category exploded. We'll look at why thousands of ordinary people started talking about them, why products that solve obvious problems often spread faster than products with fancy features, what happened in stores when demand started taking off, and why seeing competitors jump into a category is sometimes one of the strongest signals you can get. And if you're into e-commerce, dropshipping, or you're trying to figure out what products are actually worth testing, this case is useful for a simple reason. Looking back, the clues were surprisingly visible. The challenge is knowing which clues actually matter. That's what we're going to unpack. Let's get into it. Before we go any further, let's quickly talk about what Mighty Patch actually is. It's a small hydroalcoholic sticker that you put over a pimple before going to bed. You wake up, peel it off, and ideally your skin looks a little better than it did the night before. Simple idea. No breakthrough technology, no futuristic invention. No, this changes everything marketing. Just a straightforward solution to a problem millions of people deal with. And honestly, that's why I got curious, because if I showed you this product without any context, I don't think most people would look at it and say, yep, that's probably going to help create a category worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But that's exactly what happened. So the question is, what were people seeing long before the rest of the market caught on? The first clue was hiding in content itself. If you go back and watch the early videos, you will notice that people weren't talking about hair cosmetics. They weren't talking about ingredients, manufacturing, or why this patch was supposedly better than every other patch on the market. What they were showing was a very simple story. A pimple, a patch, 1 night of sleep, a visible result the next morning. And that's part of what made this category so powerful. The problem was obvious. The solution was obvious, and the result was easy to show in the camera. Nobody needed a dermatologist to explain what was happening or a 5-minute product demo. You could understand the value of the product in few seconds. People rarely share products. They share solutions, especially solutions they have personally experienced. Nobody sends a video to a friend because they're fascinated by hydrocolloid technology. They send it because they had a giant pimple show up the day before the date, a wedding, a job interview, or literally any moment when their skin decides to become the main character. And when enough people see the problem they recognize and result they immediately understand, curiosity turns into demand pretty quickly. The next clue wasn't in the product, it wasn't who was talking about it. What stood out wasn't a celebrity endorsement or a big marketing campaign. It was the fact that ordinary people kept posting the same kind of video over and over again. Different creators, different audiences, different places. Yet, somehow the same pattern kept showing up. A breakout, a patch, a night's sleep, and a result. This stops looking like content and starts looking like behavior. Because one person talking about a product doesn't tell you much. One viral video doesn't tell you much either. But when hundreds of unrelated people keep having the same experience and sharing it with other people, that's usually a sign you are looking at a category with a lot more demand than it appears to have on the surface. In fact, this one is my favorite question when evaluating a product. If customers disappeared tomorrow, would the company still need to create all of the marketing itself? Or are customers already doing part of the marketing for free? The next clue showed up in retail. And this is one of the strongest signals you can get. Because it's one thing when people watch videos, and another when they start showing up at the stores with money in their pocket looking for the product. As Mighty Patch kept spreading across TikTok, people started running into the same problem. They couldn't find it. Customers were posting about empty shelves. Target employees mentioned products repeatedly selling out. People were driving to stores specifically looking for Mighty Patch and leaving frustrated because there was nothing left to buy. And that's a pretty loud signal. At that point, you're no longer wondering whether people are interested. People have already made their decision. They are actively trying to buy the product. For me, This is one of the clearest signs that the category is gaining momentum, because products don't sell out over and over again unless demand is growing faster than supply can keep up. The next clue shows up inside the category itself. At first there was only basically one patch. Then there were invisible patches, night patches, body patches, different sizes, different packs, more options for different solutions. And that's a pretty strong signal by itself, because companies don't keep expanding the product line unless people are buying it. If demand isn't there, you don't launch 5 new versions of the same thing. But if customers keep coming back, suddenly it makes sense to create more options, take up more shelf space, and give people more reasons to buy. That's what makes this signal so useful. The demand wasn't growing around one product anymore. It was growing around the entire category. The next clue came from the competition, and this is where a lot of people get discouraged too early. As pimple patches became more popular, Hero wasn't the only company paying attention. Soon there were alternatives everywhere: Starface, Peace Out, Rail, CosRx, store brands, private label brands, retail brands. For a lot of people, seeing competitors show up feels like a bad sign. But if you think about it, companies don't spend money launching new products, creating new packaging, and fighting for shelf space just for fun. They do it because they believe there is demand worth competing for. And that's exactly what started happening here. All of these companies were looking at the same thing and reaching the same conclusion. People want pimple patches. In fact, I usually find copycats much more interesting than the original product, because copycats tell you that other businesses see the opportunity too. And if more companies keep entering the category, there is often a sign that demand is still growing and there is still room in the market. The opportunity isn't necessarily over. The market is simply getting bigger. The next clue came from the media. At some point, articles started popping up everywhere. Beauty publications were writing about pimple patches. People were calling them the next big skincare trend. And sadly, this is where most people first notice a trend. Not at the beginning, near the middle. Because by the time journalists start explaining why something is popular, the internet has usually made their decision already. The media didn't create demand, but documented it. And eventually, the biggest signal of all arrived. A check worth roughly $630 million. In 2022, Church & Dwight acquired Hero Cosmetics. Yes, companies make bad decisions all the time, but writing a check for hundreds of millions of dollars because a product had a good month on TikTok usually isn't one of them. They're making a bet that demand will still be there years from now, that people will keep buying these products and retailers will keep carrying them, and that the category still has room to grow. And if you're someone who is constantly trying to figure out which products are worth paying attention to, that's useful information. Because by this point, you're no longer looking at a random product that happened to go viral. You're looking at a category that multiple companies, major retailers, and eventually a public corporation all believed was worth investing in. So what can we learn from all of that? The rise of Mighty Patch wasn't really about skincare. It was about watching the same story repeat itself over and over again. People found a solution that worked, started sharing it with other people. Demand kept growing, stores struggled to keep the product in stock. Competitors jumped in, the media started writing about it, and eventually a public company was willing to spend $630 million to buy the business. And if you're into e-commerce or dropshipping, that's probably the most useful part of this entire case study. Because the next time you are looking at a product and trying to decide whether it's worth testing, you can go back through these clues and figure out where that product is in the story. Is demand actually building, or are you just looking at a random product that hasn't shown any real signs of momentum yet? And that's really the lesson. Most people wait until a trend becomes obvious. Trend researchers look for clues while it's still easy to ignore, because by the time everyone agrees something is a great opportunity, it usually isn't one anymore. If you enjoyed this breakdown, you should watch my video about Dubai chocolate next, because even though one is dessert and the other is a skincare product, the signals appeared in surprisingly similar ways. I'll put that video on the screen right here. And if you found this useful, make sure to subscribe. On this channel we break down real products, real trends, and real market signals to figure out what's actually driving demand. The goal isn't just to find products that look interesting, but to understand which products are worth paying attention to, which categories are growing, and where it might actually make sense to spend your time, money, and ad budget. So if you're into e-commerce, dropshipping, or you're simply trying to get better at spotting opportunities before everyone else does, stick around. And I would love to hear from you, was there a signal in this case that stood out to you the most? Or is there a product or category you would like me to break down next? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.